Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the Stratford ARB meeting to order. It's 6:38 on August the 12th, 2022. We have an agenda. First on the agenda is approval of minutes from our May 12th, 22 meeting. Any discussion, comments from the commissioners on the minutes from May 12th?
I'll make a motion to approve as noted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes approved. We have an agenda tonight, but there's been a request to change the order. Can I accept the motion to change the order?
Motion to review the projects in reverse order as presented on the original agenda, beginning with 7050 Main Street and following with 1255 West Broad.
I'll second that.
Okay, 750 Main Street, review of petition to zoning commission by AM Group on behalf of the Stratford Super Stop and Realty LLC for a renovation of a gas station and convenience store at 7050 Main Street.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Benjamin Proto. I'm an attorney here in Stratford at 2885 Main Street. I represent the applicant and petitioners. This is a property that I think you all are probably aware of, but probably miss most of the time. It is the old gas station in front of Sikorsky on Main Street across from Lord Chamberlain. It's an interesting piece of property. It reminds me, if you recall, of the time in Atlantic City when they sought to build a huge hotel, casino, resort, and there was a little old lady who simply would not sell her house. And they built it all around her, and her house was right in the middle of the casino. This piece of property is kind of uniquely shaped, and it sits in the middle of property owned by Sikorsky Lockheed Martin. It has been there in a gas station for, as near as we can tell, back into at least the early 40s. It had been approved for some other uses previously, including a retail and convenience, what we call today a convenience store, but probably in the 40s or 50s it would have been like cigarettes and beer and whatnot. And it was never built. It always was a gas station and a mechanic shop. That property, or that business closed a number of years ago, has been sitting derelict in that spot right there in front of our big, beautiful Sikorsky and our Black Hawk helicopter. And as you know, the Sikorsky property runs from exit 53 pretty much to the Shelton line. It's a massive, massive piece of property with this little tiny piece just sitting right there. My clients want to rebuild that little piece of property into a gas station and a convenience store. And we have proposed a gas station that has 2 pumps, 4 dispensers, and a 1,500 square foot convenience store. This particular development is being done across Connecticut right now. It's called Oakland Shops. It's similar to it's smaller than the Cumberland Farms, and I forget what we call the mobiles now, all something. And those come in various sizes and shapes. There's one down the street by the Oronoque Market, or the Oronoque Plaza, that's a much larger facility, and there's some that are smaller. This would be the 3rd Oakland shop in Connecticut. There are a number of others that are planned. And you want to talk about the building and what we're doing. So I want to give you a little background on the property. And you have the survey in front of you. As you can see, it's kind of oddly shaped. And the topography is rather difficult to the rear of the property. It falls off very substantially into the Sikorsky, behind the Sikorsky fence. So we've placed the building as close as we could to the rear without having an issue with the topography. The pumps are placed as far off the street as they could without having an issue with the topography. The building itself is 1,500 square foot. It's a traditional New England style building. The lower third would be a stone veneer, with the upper 2/3 being a wood clapboard and a typical New England style metal roof. The canopy is a typical gas canopy, which would obviously cover the pump areas with the appropriate fire safety materials built into the canopy. The color schemes, I believe, are available to you. The materials of the building are literally a stone veneer, wood clapboard, and metal roof. We think we comply with the requirements of the ARB. We're utilizing as much natural material and stone as we can. It's a wood construction building. The thin stone veneer at the base with a hardy plank clapboard above, cedar shingle siding, decorative seam metal roof awning, and the roof is planned to be built up roofing. At this moment in time, I don't have our architect. Unfortunately, had a family issue that has come up, so I'm here to try to answer your questions on that. We do have 2 variances that we will be seeking from the from the Zoning Board of Appeals. One has to do with the use of the rear of the property. Normally, we would have rear parking and rear delivery. Because of the topography, we're not able to do that. So there is a provision that would allow us to not utilize that so long as we meet certain other setbacks on the side, which we do. And we are going to reduce the nonconformity that currently exists at the front on the amount of impervious material to the front. Right now, it's less than 1%. We're going to take it to 21%, which is still less than required by the regulations, but we're going to greatly improve the nonconformity. The property will become much more attractive. It's an important area of town for us, particularly as you come from Shelton. It's an entrance into Stratford for us. It butts, quite frankly, in my opinion, the most important commercial property that we have in our town. Across the street is Lord Chamberlain, again, a very important commercial property, along with the the senior housing across the street from the exit ramp. So I think what it does is it takes a dilapidated piece of property with, although not burnt out, it does kind of look burnt out, that building, and recreates that space into a much more attractive, much more useful property that fits in very nicely with the neighborhood and enhances the entrance into our town. I think it would be better at this point to answer questions or attempt to answer questions that you might have on the property or the building and what we're looking to do there.
Thank you, Attorney Proto. I want to thank you for putting that package together. It's a well thought out package. It's unfortunate the architect couldn't make it, but was there any samples available of materials? Or I know I see the color schemes, but if there was any other materials available, that would help.
We can probably get samples. They want tactile samples as opposed to photos. We can get those for you. We can get those submitted to the board.
I have some comments, but maybe we can start with other commissioners. Shannon?
Shannon Hovan, member. Thank you for the presentation. It's quite thorough and well thought out, put together. Couple comments, and I have a few questions for you. Hopefully you can answer for me. The material selection is in keeping with our guidelines. Nice to see cedar shingles, nice to see clapboard siding. The overall aesthetic of the building is sensitive to the context that it's in regards to the buildings that are surrounding it. That is very much appreciated. Second thing that I wanted to point out is I appreciate the scale of the building. I like that the cupolas sort of sit right on top of the gas station. It's not sort of blocking the building itself. You can see it from farther away. It gives it nice architectural elements that stand out above the gas station, which is you know, the less aesthetically pleasing part of what's going on site. But a few questions for you. Firstly being, do you have the drawings in front of you, sir?
What's
Do
that?
you have the drawings in front of you or no?
I have the large set of drawings.
Okay. It's labeled as the left elevation. It's detail 1 on A201. The roof plan shows a large RTU unit sitting on top of the roof. Is the cedar, is that a parapet? Is the RTU going to be behind that, or is it going to be sitting on top?
Hang on a sec. Which plan was that?
The drawing is A201. It's the left elevation, drawing detail number 1.
I think I have that one. I should have that one. Why don't I have that one? I don't have, I do have that one. I don't have that one. My understanding is, actually, I spoke with the architect this morning about that issue. The unit would be behind the parapet. It is our intention that it would not be seen
Okay.
from the street. That's the intention, as was explained to me today by the architect. Our goal is to make the entire property visually appealing and to hide the mechanicals that are obviously needed to, you know, make the building work as best we can, and to have the street view as unobstructed, or maybe it's better to say obstructed, to the mechanicals as possible.
Okay. I'm going to assume then that the sconces that are shown in that elevation indicate the roof line, and the cedar above it is parapet, and therefore the mechanical unit will sit behind that. If not, I just want to note for us going forward, if it is going to be on top of it, that we just suggest perhaps some screening is explored, if it is in fact on top of the shingles.
No problem.
Thank you. Were there any discussions for, I know it's a very small site, I know it's tight, any discussions for any site furniture, like a bike rack or a bench? I didn't see a bench anywhere, you know.
I believe we're still looking at EV, are we still looking at charging stations? The charging stations? Where, I believe, there won't be any, if you're asking about like outdoor seating.
Yes, correct.
To the best of my knowledge, that's not the case.
Okay.
Probably the accoutrements would, that we have looked at, and I believe we've had conversations with zoning, was to have at least one, if not two, EV charging stations.
Okay. In lieu of any site furniture?
Yeah, the site itself does not really lend itself to sitting outside and drinking a soda or, you know, eating a cupcake. It's not really that kind of a site.
Is there any other mechanicals on site? Is there a generator or anything that's going to be sitting outside, or is everything going to be screened on top? If
To
anything
the
else
best
is
of my knowledge, no.
Okay.
Everything would be either rooftop or within a basement. And other than if we do ultimately do, obviously, the EV charging stations, whatever required for those charging stations. It would not exceed, I don't believe it's going to exceed 2 charging stations.
Understood. Okay. And then, lastly, I don't know if you can confirm this. It looks pretty clear on the roof plan to me that the roof is draining to the rear of the building. That's where the gutters are. So there's not going to be any gutters on the front of the building, I imagine? Everything's being drained to the back?
I'll take your word for it.
Okay. That's it from me, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Just a quick note before we get John. Is there any sidewalks in that area? Or is there any proposed?
There are none proposed by us, and I don't believe there are any sidewalks along the Sikorsky property.
Okay. John, you have any comments you want to?
Yeah, Commissioner Isabel, Attorney Proto, how are you?
Good, Jen.
Couple quick questions. I guess I'll start with the exterior site features. I see a proposed decorative stone around a couple spots. Are those paver style, or is that part of the paver with pervious surface, because you said you're going to increase the amount of pervious surface that's there. I see to the south of the building and to the north of the building and the north of those parking areas, it's denoted as proposed decorative stone.
That's for the veneer piece of the building?
No, actually around the outskirts of the property, at the edges of parking areas. There's one along the building. Yeah, it's on the C2 2.0.
That one I do have.
It's right underneath the signage. There's quite a few of them, and there was not having a color palette or seeing anything like that. And you had mentioned that you're increasing the pervious area of the site. I wonder if it was that
Which one was that, John? What page?
C-2.0. There's some hedges along the bottom right of the property there, proposed.
You're just reorienting me again.
Yeah, just under the existing sign to remain, there's those honeycomb-looking features that are marked proposed decorative stone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering what that would look like. Is that going to be part of the...
paver,
Okay,
paver area.
okay,
I think, again, as you look, what it's attempting to do there is the proposed concrete pad area would be where the tanks would be.
sure.
And we have to vent the tanks, obviously.
Yep.
So if you look again to that kind of arch that those pavers are behind, that's where we intend for the vent stacks to be. So I think what we're attempting to do there is to try to make the venting area from the street view more attractive.
Sure.
It's not used for anything. There's no pedestrian use, or the only people who would use it would be employees or fuel delivery folks if there was an issue with that. So it's an attempt to, I think, create a more attractive area for that.
Sure.
Again, we also have to put in the bollards there, that they're never attractive. So any way we can detract of the person from looking at the bollards and concentrating more on, let's call it the landscaping, I think provides a better visual for the customer and from the street.
Sure. As opposed to mulch or
It's easier to
planting
care
or-
for.
Okay.
Mulch obviously gets thrown
Sure.
around. We also have, as you can see, again, it's to either side of us and behind us is the Sikorsky property. And so part of our goal here is to be a good neighbor and not have anything that would clutter their property. They work very hard. Obviously, you can see the fence line, the security fence line that they have around their entire property. We've had conversations with Lockheed. While it's not an area that obviously they use for the factory purposes, it's their street view to their property, and our goal is to be a good neighbor and make sure we're not messing up their property. And in the past, previously, the previous owners would utilize that area to park old cars on and whatnot. And again, that's not our intention. It's our intention to ensure a more natural-looking view to the Sikorsky fence and then onto the Sikorsky property, and have our piece centers on that.
Sure. One other thing we concentrate on, Shannon pointed it out for the building aesthetics relative to the mechanicals, but certainly there's stuff that has to exist outdoors at the property, specifically the dumpster enclosure and the pad.
Yep.
Any comment on the screening that's used for that? Because again, I appreciate the presentation. It looks like a really nice building. I'll get into a couple points on that. But to have the dumpster, again, it's hard to hide. As you said, you have no rear lot space
Right.
that's usable. What is the enclosure going to look like around that?
The enclosure will be fenced. Just let me see what it looks like, because I can explain it to them. So the, in other facilities, the two other facilities that we have, the enclosure is a metal wood enclosure. It's not just a fence.
Okay.
It matches the style of the building.
Sure.
So so when the gate is closed, when the front gate is closed and you can't see the dumpsters, it becomes visually as an extension of the building.
Okay.
Our
Yeah.
goal is to keep everything uniform and make it look like it's all a singular unit. Obviously, when the front opens for the pickup or the drop-off, you'll be able to see the dumpsters. But once the gate closes, it becomes more of an extension and a similar material use of the building.
Okay, yeah, that's consistent with what we typically look for. We try to avoid kind of the chain link fence, even if you're putting slats in it, you can.
No, this is.
Can't really put lipstick on a pig.
It's a metal frame with the similar wood clapboard that you're going to see on the building.
Okay. I guess the only other thing that kind of stood out, and I echo all of Commissioner Hoven's points, was the ladder on the side of the building to access the roof. Is that the one area that is really only available to put a ladder to access the roof? Again, you got this nice clapboard siding, and it's going to be painted, and the whole New England feel, and now you're going to have this access ladder, presumably, which has to have a cover over it to prevent unauthorized access up to the top.
I can talk with the architect and the site engineer to see. Again, the biggest concern we have in the rear is it begins to really fall off.
Sure.
But I can talk with the architect about it, see if that can be moved to the rear. That if the topography is what I think it is right at the rear of the building, it probably can, but I'll confirm that with the architect and the engineer. I would agree with you that we have a really beautiful building, and having a ladder on the side detracts from the beauty of the building.
Sure.
So if there's a way we can move that to the rear of the building where it's not seen, I think that's better for my client, it's better for the property, it's better for the customer. It provides a better visual experience.
Sure, and that was it. Like I said, I really appreciated, do a lot of work in the petroleum business myself, so I've seen quite a few of these sites in my tenure, and really appreciated the color schemes and the balancing of even the petroleum mechanicals up against the building. So
one of the things that they're trying to do is they do more of these around the state, is to fit them into not a cookie cutter. And oftentimes, and I've cited a number of Cumberland farms and worked very closely with Cumberland farms, including the one here on West Broad, where we spent a lot of time with the town as to what it should look like, because what it should look like in Stratford at that location is not what it should look like on the Post Road in Milford, or what we did up by ESPN in Bristol, or what we did in Southington. Each area is unique, and the look of that area is unique. And we tried with Cumberland, and I know we're trying with Oakland, to fit the building. Obviously, we have to put the building with whatever land we have, and we have to be able to utilize it in that way. But that doesn't mean you can't, if you try hard enough and you're committed enough, to be able to make the visual aspect conform and work as opposed to compete against what you have there. And that's our goal, is to make it so it becomes part of that area, not something in competition with the area, because we're not going to compete with, obviously, Sikorsky's a factory building, Lord Chamberlain is a beautiful facility, so why compete with that? Make it work together right there.
no, I agree. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Steve Law, Vice Chairman. Just a few comments, and to echo what both Shannon and John mentioned. I'm just wondering, the building, because of the proportions, are a little, it seems a little excessively tall, and I'm wondering if there's a way to break down the mass of the elevation of the building by that high portion is a vertical wall. I wonder if that could be a sloping mansard.
Which
That-
part?
So this front elevation?
Yep.
If the two wings opposite on the outside of the gable, if those portions of the wall were sloped back as like a true mansard, it may scale down the building a little bit. And it's just I think that's possible. It's just a vertical parapet wall that rises above the roof line. Is that correct?
Yes. I don't believe there's any use, there's no, other than probably to hide mechanicals.
Yeah, it's a very,
But it's not like a storage area or a utilized space.
it's a very tall building for a one-story, right? And I appreciate the effort that went into creating this, that the two towers on either side are very successful, but I think if there was a way to scale it down a little by pulling those roof lines on sloping them back on a mansard, it would help.
Okay. I will give that note to the architect.
On both, opposite both windows, I guess, just for clarification.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it looks like you've drawn in some lines.
yeah.
Okay.
So that, to emphasize the gable.
Sure.
Right now, the gable, the triangle of the gable sits on a vertical, a flat wall, and it extends beyond the footprint of the gable. It's just a little odd.
Okay. I will make note of that to the architect.
And the sconces, on the side of the building, I think they're GN sconces.
Okay?
Can they be lowered? They seem to be awfully high on the building. Is that lighting that's sidewalk lighting, right?
Around the building lighting, yes.
Yeah. So I think, they would probably benefit from, the light level would benefit if they were brought down, and architecturally, I think they make more sense lower.
I'm sure it all depends on where you're going to put the outlet box, is where it's going to go.
Right.
That's an easy one, I think.
And I also want to echo Commissioner Bell's comment about the ladder. If there was any way to move that ladder to the back corner, that would be, I think, beneficial for the overall
Look at the building. and the
aesthetic of the building, yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Was there a transformer on site?
Not that I know of.
I think that's all the comments I have. Any other further discussion from commissioners?
I had one other thing. As you mentioned, it's not a true, Commissioner Isabel, as you mentioned, it's not a two-story structure. It's one story, but
Right.
made to look like two. Is there going to be interior lighting in those upper sections behind the windows in the evening, or no? They'll just be black at night and then look like a window during the
Right.
day?
I think it's more a visual effect than a lighting effect.
Okay. That was it.
Thank you, Commissioner Isabel. Any further comments from Rick? Could I entertain a motion for a recommendation? John? Huh? Yeah. So, yeah, okay, yeah. So we had a few comments that we'll put into a letter coming back to the applicant. I think the, pardon?
You want me to read what I have?
Yeah.
We can provide the samples. Hopefully that won't slow down your recommendation.
Yeah, it's just nice to have as part of the
Yeah.
package.
We can get those
I'll
for you.
make a motion, and then I'll defer to you. So, at this point, I'd make a motion for a favorable recommendation that, as outlined in the plans and as presented by the applicant's representative, this proposed application fits within the design guidelines established by the Architectural Review Board, with some suggested modifications as to be read by the secretary, and as the chairman pointed out, will be incorporated into a letter to the zoning commission. So those, the Board of Zoning Appeals. And those recommendations would include the following.
Rooftop transformers should be hidden by parapet or other screening. Ladder on site of building to access roof, to be moved to the rear of the building if possible. Mass of building broken down by lowering elevation of the building wings.
The
Slope
wings
building size with mansards to emphasize the front gable. And and GN sconces should be lowered.
Just a question on that. Were you
Just the
talking about?
the upper portion where
Not the
cedar shingles.
towers.
Not the towers.
Okay, so I want to make sure wings and
Yeah.
towers were two different things.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Okay. Second application is 1255 to 1299 West Broad Street. Review of petition to zoning commission by West Broad Property Owner LLC for the redevelopment of an identified brownfield site into a new warehouse facility at 1255, 1299 West Broad, and demolition of an existing industrial building at 1255 West Broad Street.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and Mr. Chairman. My name is Barry Knott. I'm a lawyer with the firm of Knott & Dunn with offices at 1656 Main Street, Stratford, where I also reside. I'm here on behalf of GFI Partners at 133 Pearl Street, Boston, Massachusetts, and I want to introduce the members of our team who are in attendance this evening and available to answer your questions. Bill Buckley is the project director from GFI Partners. Leif Ronaldson is the Vice President of Construction from GFI Partners. Jim Thornhill is architect from AFS Architects, from whom you will be hearing more in a moment. Bill Kenny is a soil scientist from William Kenny and Associates, and Pat Rose is an engineer and architect from Rose Tizo in Fairfield. Now, my client is the contract purchaser of two pieces of property on West Broad Street near the westbound entrance to I-95, which property is known as 1255 West Broad Street, which is known as the Hampford property in the back, and 1297, 1299 West Broad Street, also known as the Ross and Roberts property, which is located closer to West Broad Street. The total parcel is 14.06 acres in size, the majority of which is zoned MA Light Industrial, with 2.2 acres of the property zoned MB General Industrial. That general industrial property is located on the farthest western part of the site, which is the rear of the property. The property located within the first 160 feet back from West Broad Street is zoned commercial, although we won't be using that area other than for access, for ingress and egress. My client is proposing to construct a 231,000 square foot light industrial building on this property to be used as a warehouse or distribution facility. The proposed use is a permitted use in the zone in which the property is located. It's permitted. The property is currently contaminated, however, and in need of environmental remediation in order to comply with the Connecticut Transfer Act. It also contains two areas of inland wetlands, one of which is also contaminated. As part of this development proposal, my client intends to remediate all of the environmental contamination on the property, including the environmental contamination located within the existing wetlands, and restore, expand, and enhance the existing wetland to pre-contamination status. Accordingly, in addition to ARB approval, the development of this site also requires approval from the Stratford Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission and special case approval from the Stratford Zoning Commission. An application has already been submitted to the Inland Wetlands Commission, and a hearing is scheduled on this application for August 17, 2022. An application will be submitted to the Zoning Commission by August 24, 2022, and that application will be heard at the September 28, 2022 Zoning Commission public hearing. At this time, I'd like to introduce Jim Thornhill, our architect for the project, who will discuss its architectural design. Additionally, the other professionals involved in this project with whom I have already mentioned are available to answer any questions you may have regarding this proposal. Jim?
Good evening. My name is Jim Thornhill. I'm a principal with Applied Form and Space Architects from Andover, Massachusetts, and we'd like to give you a summary of our West Broad Street project. This is a one-story building. It's just over 230,000 square feet. It's composed of 2 tenant spaces, one being 80,000 square feet, the other one just over 50,000 square feet. The building on the east and west elevations measure 320 feet. The north and south walls measure 720 feet. And the clear interior height is 36 feet. This is a pre-engineered metal building, which for GFI partners typically consists of an exterior wall, which is a 3-inch insulated metal panel, and a roof structure, which is 2 layers of batt insulation with a standing seam metal roof over. The design concepts we'd like to convey to you include the, excuse me, the building placement on the site, which is to the rear of the site. This allows a visual distance from the I-95 corridor, and this also provides parking, but more importantly, landscaping on the south portion of the site. The building, by its placement, does fall away from I-95, so it doesn't present itself on its long dimension on the highway. There's kind of a forced perspective that somewhat conceals the depth of the building, the 720-foot depth. Loading docks are only placed on the east and west elevation. There are no loading docks on the south elevation of the building. What we've introduced into the project is a 10-foot high CMU base for the building. This introduces a human scale element into the building. This is not a gray split face CMU. Our intention is to use not an orange brick color or a red brick color, but like a darker red to brown warm tone CMU color, so kind of a brick tone, but it would be CMU. This 10-foot high base, as I mentioned, does provide a human scale element to it, and it provides a somewhat of a scale element to existing adjacent buildings that will be remaining. The insulated metal panels are arranged to express the structure of the building and to help reduce the visual scale of the building. We have dark colored horizontal panels on the building corners, and then a lighter color vertical panel in the middle. These would be like a warm gray tone metal panel. There are clerestory windows that are placed to help further articulate the facade, as well as to provide some natural light into the building. The placement of these windows would help to obscure any interior operations from exterior views, being a warehouse type of situation. And the last element I'd like to point out are fairly large 5x4 downspouts at each major column grid. Our major column grid is 56 feet by almost 51 feet. These are, of course, necessary for the gutters along the building, but they do express the structure to a certain extent and to help to provide a visual rhythm with the metal panel system as well, the metal panel layout, I should say. The office component, which you can see in this rendering, really allowed us to take a deeper dive into the design guidelines, the Arb Design Guidelines. We broke the footprint of the building by projecting this office space out into two different directions. It's a kind of a traditional layout. It has the 10-foot base. It's got a wall middle section and then a cornice. The height of the cornice is 24 feet, and this is kind of a visual step down from the height of the main building. This is further articulated with 18-foot high storefront windows, which further help that kind of step down in scale. And the grid arrangement on those storefront windows helps to further articulate the human scale of this office element. There is a projecting canopy over the office entry to help announce itself as the main entrance for that office space, and there are wall sconces placed along each of the piers along that office component. Those are more or less decorative wall sconces just to provide a little bit of ambient light more than anything. And the placement of the office component is on the southeast corner of the building, which was really the most advantageous to maximize visibility from West Broad Street as well from I-95. This is really the closest corner of the building to each one of those ways. And just to speak a little bit more about the materials, like I mentioned, the base would be like a warm brick colored CMU, the warmer gray tones for the metal siding. And then the office component itself, what we're looking at is actually, it's a fiber cement product, but it's a warm wood tone. It almost looks like rough sawn wood. I think it reads fairly close in the renderings as to the one tiny 3x3 sample we were able to get, which we did not bring tonight. We reached out to a number of suppliers trying to get metal panels and CMU samples, and all we came up with was these tiny 3-inch fiber cement panels for the office component. So with that,
Good evening. I'm Bill Kenny. I'm the principal of William Kenny Associates in Fairfield. Barry's correct. I'm a soil scientist, but in addition, I'm a professional landscape architect and a wetland scientist. So our firm was hired to help with some of the environmental issues with the property as well as the landscape architecture. We have prepared the planting plan that you have before you, and there's a separate drawing that deals with wetland mitigation. Barry mentioned that there's one wetland on the property, a small isolated area that's sort of a remnant development occurred all around this area, and over time this small wetland area has been contaminated, and it's going to be removed in order to complete the remediation of that contaminated area. And that is in this area right here where that small wetland will be removed, and we have designed a remediation or restoration and enhancement of wetlands in the western part of the site. It includes creating new wetlands and enhancing some of the existing wetlands and upland areas that are there. In addition to that, and consistent with your guidelines, we do have street trees, parking lot trees, and other landscape trees. And the landscape trees include this environmental planting that we're proposing. We got quite a bit of forest that we're restoring in the west, and also a pocket of forest on the southern portion of the property where it abuts 95. And I also want to point out there's an existing line of woodland along the southeast corner of the property between the entrance ramp to 95, the southbound entrance ramp, and the property. There's deciduous woodland there that's just off-site, and that'll remain. Our street trees, we have a small amount of frontage here. This is the Dunkin' Donuts building where Dunkin' Donuts is just on West Broad. And we have a couple of street trees either side of that where our entrances come in. And then an abundance of parking lot trees throughout. And as Jim was mentioning, with the building pushed back to the north, it allows us to do quite a bit of planting within the parking lot, and then also in these two smaller green spaces here to help break up the elevation of the building there. And we've incorporated evergreen trees in one area here so that you just don't have green for three seasons, you have green for 4 seasons to help break up the facade of the building. In addition, consistent with your regs, all our plantings are native. And we did pick things for year-round interest and spatial organization and so forth. And so pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Jim. Is that the extent of it, Barry?
That concludes our presentation, other than availability for questions that you may have of any of the experts.
Thank you. And I want to, again, thank you for putting together a pretty comprehensive package. I'm sure we'll have some comments. One of the major comments we might want to talk about is just the overall size of the building and how it fits in with the neighborhood. John Zabel, you want to go first?
I'll go first. Again, I'll start from the outside and then work my way towards the building, seeing as we ended with the discussion of the plantings and such. I noticed there was a retaining wall called out because I saw it in the detail. I did have some difficulty locating on the site plan. I just wondered, again, from the get-go, very nice looking building, nice color palette, things of that nature. So my eye was drawn to the use of a retaining wall, and kind of if you could describe the use, location, materials.
Pat Rose from Rose Tizo and Company, 35 Brentwood Avenue in Fairfield. Regarding the retaining wall that's proposed is on the back side of the building. There's a dark line that goes along the railroad where the jog is in the property line. And we're very close to the railroad right there. We have to do some grading. We need to create a small retaining wall in order to do that grading without affecting the railroad.
Okay. So typical gray block, or?
Yeah, gray block wall. It's your typical Bronco, Versalock block wall.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fences. There's a couple locations that were called out for fences. I didn't see anything about the makeup or construction, color.
Yeah, currently we have not located all the fencing yet at this point.
Okay.
It's not quite there yet, especially with tenant requirements and things like that. We're not going to know what's required for security issues.
Again, consistent with our guidelines, we like them to blend into the natural environment as much as possible.
Right.
Or align with color schemes, palettes of the built environment that you guys are proposing here.
Right.
Just for a point of record. Again, seeing as there is office space that's proposed, I do like the location of it. I think the building, its location on the property, fits well within the context of the property. The setback from 95, I think, is appropriate. Is there going to be a place for employees to congregate, even a small area? People take a break, want to go outside. I see there's all these forested areas, these grass areas, these other areas that are going to be built up. Was any consideration put into a bench or two out in that area just so that people can enjoy this environment that you're creating?
It's certainly something that we can look to put into our plan.
Okay, just a placemaking area on the
Smaller-
property. Again, you're
smaller.
going through all that wetland restoration and such to create those nice environments. Hopefully they could be appreciated by those folks that are working. Trash receptacles, as you heard in the other application, that's something we look at and say, look, beautiful site, well-developed and everything, just to make certain that that type of stuff is visually screened, both from the road if possible and the tenants. One or two more things about the building. You mentioned the sconces. Are those just direct light sconces? Do we have up lighting and down lighting off the sconces? I know some of the ones we show in our guidelines are a sconce, but then they have up and down lighting. Is that the intent of these, or it's just a solid stationary?
Our intention was to have just a nice, soft, glowing fixture, kind of just to accentuate the brick and the cladding on that.
Sure.
If the preference is an up and down fixture, so nothing comes out horizontally, we're not seeing these as like a major element. The site lighting is providing all the necessary human safety lighting. This is just
Sure.
honestly an embellishment.
I think a lot of times that up or down lighting accentuates, if it's a good contextual material, I think it helps highlight it, especially during the evening.
Yep.
If they're going to be on. So just a thought, I'd be interested what some of the other commissioners have to say about that.
I'm perfectly happy to accommodate that. That's I kind of fell in love with that fixture given the proportions of it. It's almost a 20-inch tall fixture. I'd even like to have something taller. But if it is like an up and down fixture, I think that'd be perfectly appropriate as well.
Okay, and then the last thing I had was one of the drawings, one of the elevation views mentions RTUs beyond, and it didn't really speak to what the screening material was. It just said they're beyond, and I had trouble identifying if there was a material proposed for them to be beyond, or they're beyond the roof line, so they may not be visible. I was issues with that.
It was probably on the north elevation.
I could find it. I apologize that I did not bookmark that.
No, it would likely be on the last sheet, if that's, I'd like to double check that.
Let me get to Oh, here it is, right here. It's on A2.02. Yep, that one right there.
That as well, too, yeah. So what we're considering is that there would only be a small number of rooftop units on the building. The RTUs that are typically used by GFI, they're about 4.5 to 5 feet tall. We pushed those more, I think they're about 20 or 30 feet back from the eave end of the building. The roof pitch, it's a 1/4 inch per foot, and given the height of the building, it's only about a 4-foot height difference from eave to ridge.
Okay.
So given the plate, basically what I'm trying to come down to is we're not going to see these from ground level.
Okay.
The eave height is going to be 44 feet from the slab level. We've done a number of these buildings with a number of RTUs. You just don't see them. The geometry doesn't work out.
Okay.
The only place you might be able to see it is from an elevated stance. We tried to get as many elevations as we could.
That's what I was pointing.
Yeah.
From I-95, they'll certainly be visible. I guess that's what I was thinking about. As you're
Okay.
driving by, you're gonna be at that height or close to the roof.
I'm honestly not convinced that we would.
Okay.
We've tried to get a height relative to our slab height versus different portions on I-95. We think it's about a 25-foot height difference, as it is right now. And so even from 95, you'd still be 20 feet below that eave line.
Oh, okay.
So in this perspective right here, we purposely took that at 30 feet. And if you look very, very closely, you can see the edge of one of those rooftop units. So that elevation on that perspective is at 30 feet.
Okay, yeah, I see that there. All right.
It's something we did look at carefully.
Sure.
because we
I
know
mean,
it's
that's
a
again, one of those things we look at. You're spending all this time with the exterior materials, the siding, stuff that's visible from ground surface, from people entering the building. That's one thing we always impress, is stuff like that. We don't want it to take over and become an eyesore for such a well-put-together project.
Well, thank you. And the other kind of caveat, or maybe it's not even a caveat, is we reached out to a number of building manufacturers that we typically work with just to see what screening options are available. And believe it or not, no one has any screening options for these types of buildings. So we'd kind of be inventing our own if it was needed.
Sure.
And part of that is that, of course, a screen is typically for, a flat roof, membrane-type roof, which is easy to penetrate, connect vertical stanchions to the building structure, and to seal those penetrations. On a building like this, where it is a standing seam roof, it is a floating roof. The roof is held on with clips, and there's a lot of movement in that roof itself. So if we have just a vertical stanchion kind of penetrating that, we're kind of inviting trouble with
Sure.
differential movement. So if we thought we were going to see the RTUs, we would have to pursue that. And we'd be kind of inventing it might be the first metal building with a mechanical screen.
Okay.
And then related to that as well too. So as you have the mechanical screen up there, you get snow drift. You're introducing additional loads onto a building that is relatively a light building.
Okay.
So it's something we have considered carefully. We're not convinced that you are going to see the RTUs, and so we've kind of left it at that till this presentation.
Okay, and I appreciate that.
Just if I could tag team on that, is there any consideration to moving them to the north side of the ridge?
If needed, I think we could. It would just be a longer interior duct run to get to those RTUs are specifically for the office areas. And so, of course, the most efficient way is just to have vertical ducts that drop straight down. I think it would, if needed. The run, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm also, I have a couple other things. I don't want to steal Shannon's thunder.
Shannon?
Shannon Hovan, member. Are the storefront frames at the office entrance red or brown? I didn't see that on the, unless I am losing my eyesight.
What we're hoping for is a nice bronze color.
Okay.
You know, something, and that would be a matching in the canopy as well too. So that kind of continues with like the warm tones that we're hoping to achieve with the, for lack of a better term, the faux wood siding on the office component.
And the windows elsewhere, black frame?
No, it would match.
It would match, everything would match,
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. All the frames would match.
Understood. So do all employees enter in these front two entrances, or is there like a rear entrance for anyone working in the distribution center? Does everyone come in the front? Because I didn't see, unless I missed it, I didn't see any lighting depicted on the exterior elevations, with the exception of the front elevation.
There was there will be, there's actually a small side door over here. Typically an arrangement like this, the office employees would come in from that office entrance. Any warehouse employees would come in from a side entrance. Nothing overly glamorous for the warehouse employees necessarily. We probably should show very small wall packs above those doors, just as an egress component. In reviewing the site lighting, the site layout lighting, our foot candles are really taken care of everywhere for around the building for any life safety elements.
Okay, that was where my thought came from. Just the site is visually obstructed on all sides. You wouldn't be able to hear anything with a train going by or an I-95. So just in concern for anyone who's going to be on the site. We know it gets dark at like 4 p.m. here at certain times. So just to have lighting around any entrances, any doors in the back of the building, just that's really where my consideration came from. So thank you for clarifying that.
It'll definitely be adequately lit. It's not going to be overly lit, but I think the site lighting diagram conveys that well.
Do you have, I hate to prolong this, do you have a site plan up there? I didn't really see sidewalks on the renderings, and I don't know if anybody can just sort of walk me through how pedestrians interact with this. This building is so large and everything, just how they interact with the site at all, if that's at all possible, really quickly.
There is sidewalks along the front, yeah, exactly. So anyway, in this parking there is.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Basically, from this last or first parking space all the way down, and a little bit of the component at the office, it's all sidewalk.
Okay. John, I'll bounce it back to you, and then I may have some more, but thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Steve Law, Vice Chairman. I have a few comments regarding the size. Just because it is, 730 feet long, it's a big building. You know, our guidelines like to introduce articulation of facades where we can. And I noticed you've made some attempts to change the siding in a couple of areas from vertical to horizontal. Just if there's any way to make any kind of offsets in that building line so that there's more pop in those transitions between vertical and horizontal siding, just to get a little relief. It would help break down that overall scale.
One, let me make sure I get the right drawings again.
Along, yeah, just in tandem with that comment, if you look at that east-south elevation, do you have the south elevation?
While Jim's putting that exhibit together, I can address the size issue you had
Yeah.
raised earlier. The Ross and Roberts building that was raised in shortly after 2008 was approximately 180,000 square feet, and it was 4.5 stories high with 75-foot-high chimneys going into heaven. The current Hamford property, which is still there, is 70,000 square feet. So between the two properties that were there, we had a 250,000 square feet on this property. This is not quite that big, but that's how we were able to justify the size. It's less than, but not too far away from that which was previously there, but much smaller height-wise, and we're not discharging contaminated air into the environment anymore. Thank you.
So Jim, just before you get into that explanation, if alongside of that note, if there's any way to introduce some symmetry between the windows and the panel transitions, it looks like now it doesn't really correlate with the grouping of windows. You got 6 and then 2 and 6 and 2, but it would help if those groupings somehow related to the transitions in the siding. Is that?
No, it makes sense. There is a little, there's a symmetry about the middle. We kind of lose it with kind of 2 bays of horizontal siding at the office component.
Yeah.
We didn't want to just stop that horizontal portion at that first bay. We kind of like the way it looks wrapping around that office component. But honestly, one thing that we could do is just continue that row of clear stories right on through, so that between the 2 end caps, that there's just windows straight on through.
And what about the alignment of the panels from horizontal to vertical? Is there any way to get some depth, some setback?
I would love to, but the people standing behind me would absolutely kill me. And the reason is this, because it's a warehouse space, the racking becomes the driver of, the racking is the driver of the structure of this building. It's form follows function, to put it very simply. The 56-foot bay, it's derivative from the ideal spacing for loading docks, which also happens to correspond with ideal spacing for high-piled storage. So any variation on that wall plane, as nice as it looks on the exterior, it just becomes, there's no function to it on the interior. One thought that we had in terms of that is we have these 3 empty bays that we had considered. Between the sidewalk and the building, there is a little bit of green space. One element that we had considered was to build a freestanding, or mostly freestanding, vertical trellis out and away from the building. That's something that would provide more of a 3-dimensional look to the building. I think it's something that would look kind of cool as you're looking down the side of the building. It's going to give some shadow lines on that side wall as well too. I think it's going to help with in terms of a 3-dimensional feature, and it could be relatively tall. I mean, it's something that could probably be 25 or 30 feet tall. It could be something almost an art piece more than anything. I don't want to say that we'll plant vines and they'll grow and look wonderful on this thing, because I've never seen that done successfully. But I think a really cool looking vertical trellis at those 3 kind of blank spot areas would go a long way.
Are you talking just in the center on the south elevation?
On the south elevation, what I'm thinking is between column lines 3 and 4, then again between 7 and 8, and then the last one is between 11 and 12. Those are kind of blank wall areas right now.
Yeah, I think that would help. Just alongside, following that further on the 2 other elevations, it looks like the transitions between horizontal and vertical come down and are right in the middle of a dock door. Can that
Can that be adjusted?
Can that be adjusted
I'm
so
sure
that
we can
it
adjust
comes
it.
between dock doors?
I'm sure we can adjust that. Yeah, it's a little bit off here and a little bit off there.
Yeah,
We kind of placed it the same dimension off a column grid just for ease of transition because there's a certain interior framing that has to be done.
yep,
We can't just rely on horizontal girts for the vertical panels.
Right.
We have to introduce vertical members within the horizontals to support the horizontal siding. So it's this kind of actual kind of flip-flop. So keeping it a little bit away from the columns could help. But if you prefer an alignment with the edge of the dock door, we can make it happen.
yeah, it certainly would help. What I'm, I'm trying to make some articulation of the overall mass, and when it comes down right in the middle of a door, it's a little odd.
Sure, yeah. It's a little tricky because honestly, the building isn't symmetrical. On the south and north elevations, it is symmetrical, but the end walls are not.
Yeah,
There's one odd bay at the end where you drive into it. It's smaller than the 56-foot bays. So basically, if you were to draw a line at the ridge, it wouldn't be in the middle of our column grid. So it's not a symmetrical building. We try to make it look as symmetrical as we can, but you're absolutely correct. Your eye does pick up on localized alignments like that.
okay, oh, the stairs on the north side, it appears that the site is relatively flat. So on the south side, there's no stairs, but on the north side, there's stairs.
It's part of that is two things. I was going on vacation, to be quite honest, and we needed to get these done and submitted before my vacation came around, and the final grading hadn't been completed at that time. So our understanding, or our approach was, worst case scenarios, we're going to have stairs at each one of those doors
On the north side.
on the north side. Typically in a project like this, the grade would be close to grade level and it would be absolutely accessible at the office entry,
Yeah,
but then it would drop down to 4 feet at the loading docks, obviously,
yeah.
before the side level. So that's definitely a coordination issue.
Thank you. John, you had some additional comments?
Excuse me, John Zabel, member. Just two things. The cornice material, I didn't see it called out anywhere. I'm assuming that's going to be aluminum, like,
It's
Metal.
either going to be aluminum, possibly FRP. It's going to be one of those two materials. It would be painted though, so ideally we can have a similar palette between the storefront material and that cornice material.
okay. And then one other thing was the color of the sidewall heating units. Are those intended to stand out because they looked like they weren't going to be colored the same as the panels?
The intention is to have them the same color as the panels.
Okay. I think some of the drawings, it was a little deceiving if they were going to be the same color or not.
Sure.
That was it.
Transformer? Is there a
There-
transformer on site?
Have they been?
Where,
It'll be-
is it located yet?
It hasn't. It hasn't been. We don't know the location yet. It will be ground mounted and it will be screened.
Any other discussion or comments from commission members? Shannon? Okay, do we have a motion and then we'll go through our list?
All right. I'd like to make a motion that we find the application for the proposed warehouse distribution facility at 1255 through 1297 West Broad Street, generally in accordance with our guidelines. However, we do offer some proposed modifications or considerations to be made of the applicant prior to bringing it before the zoning commission. Those include the following.
I have a kind of a list too.
Then you go.
So, just to enhance anything we can do to enhance the aesthetic of the fencing, so we get a better understanding what that looks like. If there's an opportunity for placemaking benches or for pedestrians or for employees, screening of any kind of garbage enclosure, considering up and down wall sconces on that office portion of the building, and introducing some kind of green wall or trellis in those three bays along that south elevation. Was there any else?
I think good contextual materials are needed for the sconces. Something I need to hear that John said.
That one was if the other commissioners had agreed. I don't think we had any discussion about it, relative to whether we wanted wall washing from the sconces or not. Are you guys in agreement?
Yeah,
That would
I
be
think that's, yeah, I think that'll help give it some more verticality,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, that's what I was aiming.
Yeah.
Do you want to add RTUs be moved to the north?
Oh, yeah, if there's a, well, if you can consider moving RTUs to the north, I think that's an issue, if you could just clarify that.
I think with the caveat there that if it's proven that they're not going to be visible from those other areas, if it can be moved, obviously within reason, that would be something to consider.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
To me.
Do we have a motion to close the meeting? Adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn meeting.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.